Eclipse Baits prides itself on the use of fresh and quality ingredients in all of its boilies. Dave gives us an in-depth and interesting insight into some of these key ingredients that Eclipse uses to produce its high quality range of boilies.
So Dave, tell us a little bit about the conception of Eclipse Baits, where it started, how you've grown to be the successful business you are today.
Well, Eclipse started in 2006. That's when I first started the company. I registered it. It's a fully grown company. It's not a what I call garage or shed baits. It employs people. We make tons a day, probably about 2 ton at the latest contract was put up at. And that is it really in terms of Eclipse. That's what we've done, and then we've just grown over those years from starting small to now, as I say.
Any business does. It's a
and it's grown, and it's
your own Facebook page, your followers, your own teams, the numerous videos that you produce now for
and I've made baits for various different companies. I mean, I used to make them for a fellow called Kevin Maddox. I was involved completely in his range, so I made it from top to bottom. Made Rod Hutchinson's range of boilies.
A raft of experience is what you're telling me.
Yeah, and then now we make probably another 25 different companies, I suppose, that are out there now. I ain't going to say who they are because it's not ethical and that's not what we do.
No, but you are a manufacturer of bait.
Yeah, as well as our own range.
Leading on to this array and concoction of powders and additives that we've got on this table in front of us. I feel like I'm in a restaurant and I'm going to make something.
Well, funny enough, if you look at these are all specific to certain baits, but these 3 are specific to the insect bait.
So would that be the LSI?
That is, yes. And if you can imagine, it's pure snails in this one. That's why it's called LSI, land, snail and insect. And this is where, again, you talk about restaurants. I think it's Eston Blumenfeld or someone like that uses the actually, that's how good this product is. But if you smell it, that is the snail meat, and that is those.
Any fisherman out there, you've always got to smell and taste your bait.
Have a smell of them, Matt. Right, now that's the land snail meat, so that is specific to the land snail and insect.
Now I must say, if we was to ask anybody, what does a snail smell like? Could anybody tell us?
No, but as soon as you smell that, you say, "Oh yeah, that smells like snails. That does." It's mad, but then it is land snail.
Yeah.
Now these are the insects, and this is what a lot of the companies are using at the moment. But you'll find.
I don't even know what I want to say about it.
It's a black soldier fly. That's the grub.
Okay.
And that is what produces that. That's when that's ground down.
It's all very interesting looking at.
And
that's the finished product.
That is, yes. So then we combine both of those two. Yeah. Now a lot of our products we don't. I mean, a lot of companies they just buy in stuff. We grind stuff down. We've got proper grinders. So, for instance,
so you're going from natural to produced.
So that's got no oils, nothing taken out of it.
Wow.
Because we grind it down
into that powder.
Into that.
Wow. Keep me lit, mate. I'll stick those back away for you. It's really interesting. Something that, being part of your team, it's a good insight to understand how all of these are going into the bait.
Now, if you can also imagine, I mean, you was testament to it because you did it. You was one of them. Most of our products are tested between 1 to 2 years. I mean, so if you look at that base mix, those 3 additives were added to a tried and tested all these products. These products here, they are generically, they go in all the baits. Those are specific to an insect bait. Yeah. As well as all of these ingredients. If you look at, say for instance, green lip mussel,
GLM,
we put it in every bait.
Yeah, it's a common ingredient.
It is. It's a very expensive ingredient, but at the same time, there's nothing that beats quality.
No.
So you'll find a lot of the companies out there at the moment, and I'm not naming names or anything like that, they produce a lot of baits with just Semo soya, maize, they just make it
flour
look.
meal,
but
things like that, yeah.
We use, if you look, for instance, this is a milk powder that's got calcium casinates in it. It's got all sorts in that. But that is, if you taste it, that's one of the things.
Dip in here.
And it's there are various things that they not only that they what we call functionals, so that actually binds quite well, but it's got a solubility. Then those ingredients, for instance.
I was going to say that each one of these must have a specific purpose for the base bits, whether it's a bind, whether it's an additive,
that's right. So
fish, whether it's flavour.
You're looking at about 70%, 75% of all baits, good quality baits, will have these products in them. Then it's these other products that make them good, bad, or individualise them. So, for instance, those because
so you've got a core set that everybody's going to use in a base mix per se, and then you've got some additional bits that make up that boiling.
Yeah, see, like an insect bait, for instance. Most companies would just buy a cheap insect meal and they'll chuck it in and they'll call it an insect bait. We had 3 or 4 different types. We had the snail meat, we had all different things to it, and that is what individualises our insect bait. That's why we called it LSI. We don't call it LSI just to be fun. It's called LSI because it's land snail
and insect.
And insects, and no other company would use land snail.
So I take it that's what those snails are on the table.
Yeah, I mean that is the meat from the pure snail. There's no additives. There's nothing. I mean all that happens is the meat. These were live. The meat, they are killed humanely, if that's possible, but they are. They're dehydrated. Then they're ground down to produce a fish meal, not a fish meal, a snail meal, a powder, a meat. Now that is, and then 50% of it is the shell. So 50% of that product is the ground down meat, ground down shell and the ground down meat.
Crunch factor.
Yeah, it can become, but then we also put the insects in it, which is the black soldier fly. We have a lot of companies they use that, but we grind it down as well. So in other words, there's virtually free in there. Whereas most companies, they just...
Yeah, they've got their own way of doing it, haven't they?
They have. Now this is tiger nut.
Everybody loves tiger nut.
But most people use tiger nut meal or tiger nut flour. What we buy is whole tiger nuts, and then we grind them.
Grind them up.
So that goes within the nut bait. Now we also use a couple of free other meals. I mean, one of them is post peanut. We ain't got none sitting here at the moment because I just haven't had time to get new stock in because it goes quick. It's not something that you want to have lying around. Do you know what I mean? So we buy it in and then we use it.
So those 2 additives are specific to nut bait.
To nut baits, yeah. Now so that one there.
Your insect bait, you've got your nut bait, you've got your general base mix.
Yeah. So all of these baits. These 3 baits, like the insect, the two fish meals, which I'll show you, the nut meal, they would contain all of these.
The ones in the middle are your general ones.
And then we add
specific to nuts. That's specific to land snail.
See that there. If you smell that, because we call it supreme cream, our nut mix.
You can smell.
Right now, what uniquely identifies it as a cream? It's not just any old rubbishy flavour, liquid flavour. We do put flavours in it as well, but there's also a powdered palatant goes in it, which smells just like cream.
It does.
Now you'll find that a lot of the companies, they might do a nut bait, a creamy nut bait, but they don't necessarily do anything other than just put that in a liquid flavour, just to make to the naked eye and nose and all the rest of it. You say, oh yeah, it's the same, but it's these things that can make them individual.
And make all the difference.
Yeah. Now, for instance, this one is betaine. That's in every single bait.
Common ingredient.
Now everyone would have heard of betaine, everyone knows what betaine can do, fish love it. But so rather than just put it in a bait, because greenlet mussel for instance it's got a certain amount of betaine within its own makeup, it's inherent in it. But we actually add betaine as well, which goes in every single bait, it goes in the insect bait, it goes in, that's why it's in this pile. So it is an additive, but it's also an additive that goes in everything.
And I suppose the skill then is understanding how much of that needs to go into the makeup of the specific bait amongst all of these ingredients to get your finished product.
That is why we test. I mean, if you look at, say for instance, something as like the Iconic. There was 17 different recipes until we finalised one. Now, they all had these in, but they all had different levels.
I remember.
For instance, yeah, do you remember? You tested it, you was one of the major testers of it. So, but it was when we finally found a certain amount, a certain grammage of that went in, and a certain ounce of the milk powders went in, the whey proteins, which is that one.
Yeah, that's the way.
Right, that's paprika. The greenic mussel, there was a certain amount of levels of everything, and it took 17 recipes to finally, what the optimum level of those was.
Yeah.
And then those particular things stayed the same, and they have stayed the same, and it's these that have individualised a different bait. I mean, a fish meal bait, if you look at a fish meal bait, that's low temperature fish meal.
Pre-digested fish meal and...
Right, so you must have heard of LT fish meal.
Yeah.
Well, it stands for low temperature. That is low temperature fish meal. That's in our fish meals. But a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll use a fertiliser grade fish meal, chuck it within a bait. They won't have this, they'll have a soya, they'll have a semo, they'll have a maize. Then they'll chuck a bit of fish meal in and they'll call it a fish meal bait. And then they highlight the smell by flavour, which we do use.
Yeah, your squid or something like that.
But we also use a lot of powdered palatants. Now that is just normal fish meal.
Yeah.
That one there's pre-digested.
Yeah.
Which you've heard of again, which is it's a very fine. I mean, it's very
Almost
soluble.
like flour.
That's right. Yeah. So you don't use a lot of that, but you use it.
Yeah.
Now these 4 products here.
Yeah.
These are what I would call the additives. They are what
makes, yeah.
We use them as standard.
Yeah. These are your extra.
These are the extra bits. So like, as I say, like 75% might be of that. Then you put in a certain amount of these, and then the last few percent should be made up if it's a quality bait rather than a
standard bait.
Standard bait, right? It's these products. Now, if you look at this, if you taste that,
going again.
Very nice taste, if you like Marmite. That tastes like Marmite.
Marmite Bovril, like that sticky.
It's a
yeast.
pure natural product, and that goes in the iconic. Right now, this
that one down.
this one, I ain't gonna say what it is. If you taste it, it's not nothing there, is there? But the fish can definitely taste.
There's a little bit. I want to say something like sour. No.
Yeah, there's vitamins, there's minerals, there's all sorts in that. But fish absolutely adore it. Now we would put that in as an extra. It goes in everything. Don't get me wrong.
But there's a certain percentage of this would be into the makeup of
into the base
one
mixes.
of your ranges, the base mix. That you go. I know that. I don't know. Call it 25 grams of that into the iconic. Yeah. That's what that needs to be.
That's it. That's correct. Now that is a pure vitamin mineral complex. Now that again is something that we add to those baits that makes them unique, and it makes them individual, and it makes those baits.
Again, that's really fine.
No, it is. Yeah. You don't. These are the things that you put in at 10 grams, 5 grams, 15 grams, 20 grams. You don't. Whereas if you look at whey protein, you might use like 4 ounces. I'm not saying you would, but you might use 4 ounces of that. Whereas that, you only use half of an ounce, for instance, in a whole 10 kilo mix. Not because it costs too much money, but because that's the optimum level that the fish can detect it at.
Yeah.
Again, I ain't
going to move on to the last one.
Yeah.
I thought that said hummus then.
And that is aminos.
Aminos. Again, another common, everybody knows you've got your aminos.
And that can increase the level.
That doesn't seem as fine as some of those. If you know
it can increase the level of the protein, but it can also make it quality proteins. Quality, different aminos make different, they're proteins, they're qualities.
Yeah.
That isn't I suppose the best way of putting it, the way is utilisable protein. That's utilisable. So you could feel, if you go back probably 10, 15 years, there was a massive cry for meat meals. Now meat and bone meals, unless you get a very specific one, there's quite a few out there, but unless you get a very specific one, they've all got wonderful protein levels, but they aren't what's called utilisable.
Right,
so whereas fish can really utilise fish meals. They can really utilise the proteins. In the proteins in meat meals, there wasn't much, unless you got the unique one that fish
benefit
did
of
like.
it.
Yeah, they didn't get the fish didn't get the benefits, so
no.
they didn't naturally look for them.
No.
So meat meals fell by the wayside as such. There are a few that well, there's one specific one that fish absolutely adore, but that's what the outcry now is for insects.
For your insects.
And it does seem that there is far greater utilisability of the protein that they've got.
Within them, that the fish, when it digests it, is beneficial to the fish.
Meat meal was sustainable, that's sustainable. So that is where these sort of products, like the fish meals, they aren't sustainable. That is. There's probably something within that insect meal that over the years, the next 10, 15 years, you ain't going to like this, but humans will be eating it as well because of the utilisability.
Well, the way that the world needs to be sustainability now, isn't it? So I think that's going to apply to every aspect of human life.
And luckily for us, it does seem that carp like it, and it's mainly because
Bonus.
they can utilise the protein that's within it.
So I'm going to ask a really specific question, Dave, and it's not about the baits, this is about you. How much of your time do you put, what sort of dedication gone into and the thinking and the science behind creating one of your baits?
It's a group effort as such, because I find things that I think might be usable within a bait. I come up with a recipe because I've got a standard protein level, a standard recipe for ingredients, a generic one which gets to 75%, which also the machines can utilise correctly. Mm-hmm. Everything is quick. It's the quickest. Because we're a commercial enterprise, it has to be quick. It works, but it also has to be quick. It has to be usable. And then I've got a good team of people that test things. It's as simple as that. And then when they test it, out of probably 15 products that we have tested, one might stand the test of time, and it ends up being something that we can go further with, and we can investigate further, and eventually, hopefully, release it
for everybody else out there in the fishing world to have benefit. You know,
and it's testing ain't for everyone, I can assure you, because
no, it is arduous, and you've got to sit behind motionless rods.
That's
sometimes.
Exactly it.
But you've also got to be able to provide that feedback. You've got to understand the elements of what you're putting in that bait. Obviously, we don't tell the Joe public and everybody else what's going on, but you need to understand what's happening with your fishing environment.
That's right. And I'm not a genius as such, so I don't know what's going to happen with a certain ingredient. All I can look at is an ingredient and think that might work. Well, how it works is something that the testers will.
I can certainly say from my own experience, I think fishing and using the bait that you provide has helped me put more fish on the bank. It's gained me great knowledge, and it's probably as much as everybody else in the team, it's gained great knowledge in learning about the makeup of bait and getting really involved and ingrained into knowing and optimising what you're doing with your bait.
To me, it was very important that people see that we just don't make a base mix, put a bit of colour in it, a different flavour, and sort of call it a different type of bait. I need people to understand that specifics are what make a quality company anyway, let's put it that way.